Back to you, Mr. Blum.
Hong Kong is an island nation, okay, with no natural resources, and they are an extremely wealthy nation. And the point I make is this: our founding forefathers were smart enough to know this as well. Nations that trade with other nations will not go to war with those nations. I would love to see Israel become the Hong Kong of the Middle East. So we need to promote trade between countries, because I believe countries that trade with each other will not go to war with each other.
All right, thank you. Speaking again of the economy, back to you, Mr. Blum.
Hong Kong is an island nation, okay, with no natural resources, and they are an extremely wealthy nation. And the point I make is this: our founding forefathers were smart enough to know this as well. Nations that trade with other nations will not go to war with those nations. I would love to see Israel become the Hong Kong of the Middle East. So we need to promote trade between countries, because I believe countries that trade with each other will not go to war with each other.
All right, thank you. Speaking again of the economy, here's another question on that. We start with you, Mr. Lange. It could be argued that the U.S. government debt is a strain on our economy, and that is, in fact, slowing our recovery. Congress seems gridlocked on how to solve the debt issue, with Republicans against tax increases and Democrats opposed to large spending cuts. How do you believe Congress should solve the problem of our ballooning public debt?
Well, as you all may know out there, I've been hammering this message for months, that we are facing the most profound moral failure in our national debt. $16 trillion in debt. My 3 daughters, before they can even ride a bike, are $150,000 in debt. We borrow 40 cents of every dollar.
And here's the interesting: we had an opportunity in the House of Representatives to pass a balanced budget amendment.
And my opponent, Bruce Braley, was the only member of the entire Iowa delegation, both Republicans and Democrats, to vote against the balanced budget amendment to require Washington, D.C. to spend less money than they bring in. And now, if you just saw the news, just this week, he all of a sudden saw the light. Come to think of it, during an election year, a few months before election, he all of a sudden supports a balanced budget amendment. And that's because we have been on air with a radio commercial calling him out over and over and over again. Bruce Braley, when are you going to understand that we must resolve this national debt crisis? But how do we do it? Yes, we support a balanced budget amendment, but we also go to capping our federal spending as a percentage of GDP. Historically, the average of federal spending is about 18 or 19%. We cap it at that. And why is that? Because these politicians can't be trusted. We can't allow them to do it anymore. So we cap percentage of GDP, and then we also reform the budgetary process. When these folks vote on bills, there must be a long-term budget outlook. Right now, they don't look beyond 10 years. They need to look 10, 20, 30 years down the road.
Now you got me flexible.
All right.
Our national debt is over $15 trillion. It's heading toward $16.3 trillion. We're going to have another debate in December in Washington, D.C. about raising the debt ceiling once again. So we're going to keep going through this and going through this and going through this, okay? Our GDP is about $15 trillion. Let's say our debt's $15 trillion. It's 100% debt to GDP ratio. Okay, Greece's debt to GDP ratio is 145%. Italy's debt to GDP ratio is 120%. We're at 100%, but we're on that glide path of Greece and Italy. Okay, and we see what's going on over there. We see the run on their banks, and we see the austerity measures. Because you know what? If government spending, government borrowing were the key to economic success in a country, they'd be economic powerhouses, would they not? Ronald Reagan was correct when he said a government can't tax and spend its way to economic prosperity. What I would propose, first of all, 2001 was the last time we had a balanced budget. Since then, revenues have grown 20% to the country. Expenditures have skyrocketed 100%. So we have a spending addiction, not a revenue problem. I propose we cut spending down to 2008 level, pre-Obama, pre-stimulus level. We made permanent the Bush tax cuts. We permanently repealed the debt tax. And we freeze it there. The Congressional Budget Office, which is nonpartisan, says we have a balanced budget in 4 years. And then because you can't trust these lawyers in Washington, D.C., these career politicians, we need a balanced budget amendment that limits the amount of expenditures to a certain level of GDP, which has been 18% over the last 30 years. I say we start there, that's a good start, and then let's drive it down even lower, because I truly believe in constitutionally limited government.
Mr. Blum, Mr. Lange.
You know, it really comes down to principle. Because Republicans, Democrats, Independents, they've all stood up at these podiums, and they've all espoused values about reducing our national debt. But it really is going to come down to putting a new generation of leaders in Washington, D.C. We can't continue to send the same old to Washington and hope for different results. We got to put people in office that really believe that the words that are coming out of their mouth, that they believe in those principles. And the national debt is the most critical issue. We must resolve the national debt crisis, and that comes with a new generation of leaders.
And by the way, these questions were formed by an independent consultant. This is on the Constitution. The Supreme Court is currently reviewing several major laws for constitutionality, the Healthcare Reform Act and the Arizona immigration law. It seems Congress does not always consider the Constitution when making laws. That could be some people's opinion. What is your personal philosophy, though, concerning the Constitution? A very general question, and Mr. Blum, would you start with you?
Well, I believe in the Constitution. I think the people that represent us should actually read the Constitution. We have strayed so far from that is the greatest political document in the entire world. I think it's the greatest document in the world, second only to our Bible. So I mean, we've strayed so far from it, we can't click our fingers and turn back to having everything be by the Constitution. But we have to start heading that direction. I mean, the founding forefathers envisioned a country set up like this, an upside-down triangle. The top of the triangle was we the people, okay, and at the bottom of the triangle was government, okay, and the government feared we the people. This is a great definition of liberty and freedom, is it not? And what has happened over the last 50 years? It's been turned upside down, and now the government is on the top, and we the people are on the bottom. Okay? And this is tyranny, my friends. This is tyranny. And I don't know of a single business person that I talk to that is not afraid of the government. You often say to people, why did you not complain to the city mayor? Why did you not complain? Because they're afraid of reprisal. They're afraid of the government. That's tyranny. We have got to get it back to we the people. And the politicians, like us guys standing here, should fear the citizens.
Mr. Lange.
Well, I think we'll see how Obamacare plays out in June and July when the Supreme Court rules on the constitutionality of that. But I think, why are we in this position? Because we have members of Congress that haven't paid attention to what the Constitution is. They haven't paid attention to that founding document. And so what I propose is making sure that every piece of legislation, every single one, cites to authority in the Constitution as to why this particular piece of legislation is constitutional. It's not a default that it actually is. It means they have to go cite to the Constitution as to why it is constitutional. And what will that do? That'll put a lot of members in Congress scrambling to open up their Constitution and figuring out why they're supporting some piece of legislation. The bottom line is we need to make it incumbent upon them to think through that process, to understand under Article 1, under Article 2, Section 8, is this a limited role of the federal government? Once they begin to have to go through that process, then and only then will every piece of legislation go through the thought process that I think is necessary as members of Congress.
Mr. Blum.
I would just like to make mention of this because I think it's very important. We as citizens in this country often give up our freedom and we give up our liberty in the name of safety. The government says give up a little bit of your freedom and liberty because we need to do that to make you safe against terrorism, for example. Our states give up their 10th Amendment sovereignty for the check from the federal government, which always has strings attached to it. I believe we can be safe and have our individual economic freedoms and liberties.
All right, thank you. Continuing on the theme of domestic issues, we turn now to immigration. Immigration, of course, is an issue of both foreign and domestic importance, and both Democrats and Republicans seem to agree that some immigration reform is needed. But like with many issues in Washington today, the two sides seem unwilling to work together toward meaningful reform. If elected, what specific areas of immigration reform would be a priority for you? First of all, Mr. Lange.
Well, first of all, we have to recognize that we are all for immigration, just not illegal immigration. Folks have come through to America for decades, through centuries of following the rule of law, following the process. We need to encourage that. And I think what we also need to understand is we need to secure the border first. Secure the southern border first. And why is that? Because if we don't stop the hemorrhaging, we can never figure out the audacity of the problem. We can never figure out the full scope of the problem. So we secure the southern border first. Once we have done that, first of all, don't say we can't do that. Because there will be talking heads up on TV that said, oh no, that's too tough, we can't do that. We can do it with technology, we can do it with defense, we can do it with drones. We can do it if we have the political will. So once we secure that southern border, then we address the problem. There's somewhere estimated between 10 and 15 million illegal immigrants in this nation. We need to shut off the magnet. Because why do they come here? Why do they come to America? Because America is the greatest country on earth. And why do they want to come here? Because they see an opportunity to provide for their family. They're human beings. They make conscious decisions how they can best provide for their family, and they think America provides them that opportunity.
But if we start to address the real problem, in that no longer can employers hire illegal immigrants, then there won't be a draw for them to come here. And I think we need to be realistic about it as well. They're human beings. They're human beings. My father worked with them in Council Bluffs over and over again. They're good workers, but they need to come here through legal channels.
Mr. Blum.
My heart goes out to anybody. I have empathy for anybody that wants to work very hard in some very, very bad working conditions to support their families, because there's nothing more honorable than work. But illegal is illegal. And I agree. First of all, we need to build the fence. Talk about a shovel-ready project, President Obama, build the fence. If the fences don't work, then let's tear the fence down around the White House. Fences work. The border, first of all. Secondly, why are they coming here? They're coming here for the jobs. That's the magnet. And we need to get tougher on our employers. We find out that they knowingly employ illegal aliens, we need to get tough on them. But also, it was interesting, I was in Marshalltown last week, and Marshalltown and the Postville area as well. So there's parts of the 1st District that have a lot of illegal immigration. And I was talking to a school teacher that evening, and she said, this is in Marshalltown, 80% of her class in high school is Hispanic. And she said, of that, 40% of them are here illegally. She said, most of them don't know the language. And I said to her, I wouldn't want to have my daughter in your class, because that has to hold everyone else up. I said, what are the local authorities doing? She said, they've given up. Because when they call the ICE officials, Immigration and Customs, from the Fed, they just turn a blind eye to it now, under Bruce Braley and under Barack Obama. We have got to stop doing that. We need to get tough on these employers that's the jobs magnet. We take care of that, they'll self-deport back to Mexico, or wherever they came from. But I will guarantee you this, if I'm in Washington, D.C., not $1 of your hard-earned money will go toward the welfare, the education, or the health care of an illegal alien.
Thank you. Mr. Lange, can you finish that up?
I just want to follow back, as I mentioned.
My father, working in a meat processing facility, works with immigrants that come to this nation through legal channels. And if you really want to understand the issue, ask them if they support granting amnesty to the illegal immigrants that came here not through the legal channels. And they'll tell you, absolutely not. And why is that? Because they took the time to follow the law. They took the time to follow the necessary rules to get their visa, to get their opportunity to come here to America, to earn their citizenship. Ultimately, we're a nation of laws. And if we start to disrespect our laws and start granting amnesty or granting special treatment for any group of people out there, then as a society we start to lose. Because now it becomes special favors. It becomes who's exempt from this, who's exempt from that. We're a nation of laws, and we all must live under them in equal treatment under the law.
Thank you very much. These now are general topics. And this next question might seem obvious, and a lot of people, both in politics and outside of politics, talk about it all the time. And I'm not really used to, in some ways, expressing my opinion, at least in front of a camera like this.
But in my opinion, this is one of the most important issues any of us in this country face, and that is the general tone of politics, how we treat each other, and whether, in fact, we can get anything done anymore. So we all need to be optimistic, but that said, that's my opinion.
Here's the specific question, and we will start with you, Mr. Blum. Partisanship seems to be getting worse in Washington, D.C. with each new election. Candidates say that they're running for office in order to change the tone or work across the aisle, and yet few actually follow through on that promise, or perhaps are not able to follow through on that promise for a variety of reasons. Now, this first question, there are two questions in here. This is very obvious, so listen, and then there's a question right after that. As a member of Congress, do you intend to work with all of your colleagues, as many as possible? And what is one step specifically you plan to take after elected to be sure that you have at least some good relationships on the other side of the aisle? Mr. Blum.
Can you repeat the question? I'm kidding. I was asked this question on a national radio show, and I said, hey, I am ready, willing, and able to reach across the aisle. I said, for example, I agree with Barack Obama on 2 points. First of all, that Kanye West is a jackass. Secondly, that Barack Obama did not deserve the Nobel Peace Prize. I agree with them. I'm ready to work with them. But in all seriousness, I'm a conservative, and I have 5 cornerstones of my campaign, and they are personal responsibility, constitutionally limited government, free markets and free trade, sanctity of life, and competition. And I will not compromise those principles. Okay? Now, I also believe in what Ronald Reagan said. He said if we can get 70% of what we want in the bill, and it moves the football toward our goal line, then we'll come back and get the other 30% a different day. And I do agree with that. You can't go to Washington, D.C., you can't stand up here and say, I'm never going to compromise. That is just not true, because you will never, ever get anything done. However, I will not vote for a bill that moves the football, so to speak, toward the line of European socialism. Okay, so as long as it's moving the football our direction, I'll vote for it, I'll reach across the aisle, I'll compromise. But I will not compromise my principles. I'd rather lose an election than compromise my principles.
Mr. Lange, 2 minutes.
Well, I think Iowa is a perfect example of that, especially the 1st Congressional District 5, because more than Republicans or more than Democrats are independents, people that are not affiliated. They don't associate with an R behind their name or an E behind their name. And what does that tell us? That means neither party has a monopoly on good ideas. And so once we recognize that, then we make it a priority of the representation that we demand. We demand it out of those that go to Washington, D.C. for us, that they don't look at the initial behind someone's name. They look at the idea that's being proposed. And as I said, no party has a monopoly on good ideas. But we also have to understand that we're not willing to compromise principles. And that's okay. That's okay, because folks are making a decision all across this country on principles, on what people believe in. And it's all right if we don't compromise on those. But when it comes to policy, we gotta make sure that we are willing to look across the aisle to make sure that just because someone has a D behind their name does not automatically mean that idea is unsuitable for us. And you asked one specific example that I could do. Here in Iowa, we know once an election passes, we're Iowans. We're just Iowans. We go to work, we take care of our family, we provide, we do what we're supposed to do. And it's the same whether somebody's elected in southern Iowa as a Democrat or in western Iowa as a Republican. So we go, we meet with them, we talk with them, say, we may not agree on everything, and that's okay. But what can we do together to abide by our principles, to lower the national debt, to resolve the national debt crisis, to rebuild American enterprise, to revive humility in government? How do we do that? Because we can do it together. Just because the initial behind our name will not stop us from talking with one another.
Okay, Mr. Blum.
I just heard him say something that I think Richard Lugar typically would say, and that is no party has a monopoly on good ideas. I'm a conservative. I'm going to go there and put forth conservative values in the Constitution because I believe in some of the worst legislation that's ever been signed in this country, like No Child Left Behind Act, has been bipartisan. So I'm always a little bit leery if something's bipartisan because it's typically bad legislation.
Okay. Now we're still on a general topic. Excuse me, and this is actually our last question, and after that we'll have closing statements, okay? Pretty easy here. I think you know yourselves very well, and again, I said it's very general, but tell us one anecdote about yourself that gives us some personal insight into how you would like to see yourself described as either an individual or as the type of public servant that you want to be. And we start with Mr. Lange.
Well, for my debate prep before I came here tonight, I had to change crib sheets. If that gives you any idea what my priorities are. I have a wife and 3 daughters, and we have our hands full. But, you know, we've made an investment in this. We believe in it. We believe in what we talk about. And, you know, frankly, there's nothing special about Ben Lange. Now, I'm just an average guy from Quasqueton, Iowa. You know, population 499. And I want folks to know that I just decided to get up and run for Congress because I believe that it's time we send a new generation of leaders there. We can't just rely upon the same old to go to Washington, D.C. We need people that are willing to stand up and put principle in front of party. But before they know that, I hope voters know I'm just a small-town guy that believes in this, that believes in our cause, and I'm thankful for all the support that we've gotten out there.
Mr. Blum?
I guess I would describe myself as someone who can make the tough decisions because we are hurting as a country. Washington, D.C. is broken. We need people that can go there and stand up to whoever the president is, if need be, stand up to the Republican leadership, if need be, and come back to their constituents and say to their constituents in eastern Iowa, I voted no because we can't afford it. We need to send people there that are not afraid to lose an election. I've made tough decisions in business. I've had to fire the founder of Eagle Point Software, a company I was at, a public company, and trust me, that got ugly, and I knew it was going to get ugly, and it ended up costing me my job. But I did what I thought was the right thing. But I think in addition to being tough, you also should be humble, you also should have fun. And I tell the story, I took my wife Karen when we were dating to the Milwaukee Symphony, and it was a nutcracker, ballet, and about 5 minutes into it, I said to her, when are they going to say something? So we got to be able to laugh at ourselves.
You have a response, 30 seconds.
Well, I do want to say that this is a big commitment for my wife and my family. And you ask, you know, what do I want voters to know? I just want them to know that we won't be outworked. We'll put in the time. We'll put in the effort. We'll put in the energy. Because if folks are going to put their trust in me as their nominee to take on Bruce Braley, I want them to know that on no opportunity will Bruce Braley defeat us. He won't outwork us on the ground. He won't outwork us in the air. He will be defeated. And how he will be defeated matters on who we select as a nominee.
All right, and so that concludes the question portion of the debate, but we're still going to have just a couple of minutes from each of you for closing statements. I'm going to start, again, two minutes. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Blum.
I'd just like to say in closing, I think I've got about 20,000 windshield miles on the Constitution van. And as I travel across eastern Iowa and listen to the people, they're upset, and that's putting it mildly. A lot of them are angry with Washington, D.C. They're afraid of Washington, D.C., much like they were in Indiana, probably with Senator Richard Lugar. We're seeing it all over the country. I think this election, I think we're at a tipping point in this country, because this country is broken. This election is probably the biggest election of our lifetime. So, my favorite definition of insanity is Einstein's definition, and that is, if we do the same thing tomorrow that we did today, yet expect different results, that is patently insane. So I'll leave you with this thought. What kind of person, if we want to change Washington, if we think Washington's broken and we really want to change it, what kind of a candidate do you want to send to Washington, D.C.? Do you want to send somebody that's going to be there for a 30-year career? Do you want to send somebody that's going to go there and take a $175,000 salary that they get paid to become a multi-millionaire? I pledge to take the salary of the average American if I'm elected, $39,366. I pledged you I will term limit myself. I've already signed the pledge to 3 terms in Congress. We have to send a different kind of a candidate because we have serious problems in this country. So I'd like to leave you with that thought. I respectfully, very respectfully, ask for your vote on June 5th. And God bless you all. And God bless America. We need it.
Mr. Lange?
Well, let me say thank you to the 5 seasoned Republican women. Thank you to KCRG for broadcasting this, and thank you for all attending tonight, because this is important. This is important that you get involved, and the fact that you take the time here matters. As you can see from tonight, there's not a lot of differences on the policy. You know, it appears my opponent's been articulating many of the same conservative principles that I've been talking about for years. So the question becomes, who can win? Who can win in November? And I would just ask you, who's more likely to win? The candidate that's built a grassroots support of over 200 county leaders across the district. Who's more likely to win? A candidate that's put forward a steering committee consisting of Republican activists, Tea Party activists, business leaders, elected officials. Who's more likely to win? A candidate that not only competes on all fronts, but also competes on the fundraising front. Who's more likely to win? A candidate that's taken upon himself to build an early voting program so that conservatives don't have to wake up the day after election and wonder, how did we lose? Because we are addressing the problem. Because you got to compete on all fronts. It's not just about standing up here and giving fiery speeches. You got to be willing to go out and put the work in. You got to be willing to go out and put the time in. You got to be willing to go out and walk in the parades, go to the chicken suppers, to soup dinners. And why is that? Because you guys, you all are making an investment in a candidate. And the question becomes, who is best able to win in November? And there is no doubt, on all fronts, every single one, we are better prepared as an organization to take on Bruce Braley. We are better prepared to go win in November. And that matters to you all. Because if we can't remove Bruce Braley from office, it doesn't matter who we put there. I just want to say, again, it's time we send a new generation of leaders. We have to send them there to Washington, D.C., because we can't rely on these suits to continue to make our decisions for us.
Thank you, Mr. Blum. Mr. Lange, this is our system, I believe, at its best, and that concludes our debate.